We are live. Hello. Drop a comment if you are studying for your exam, your BCBA exam coming up. Okay, let's do a quick icebreaker. All right. So if you're here and you're studying for your BCBA exam, we're going to be going over reinforcement. Specifically, we are going to go over reinforcement schedules. Hey, it's Kay, by the way. Thank you. All right. So we are going to go over reinforcement schedules really quick. If you've been following my page for a while on Instagram or TikTok, thank you so much for being part of this journey. As many of us know, this journey in general, as an RBT, whether you're in a school setting, you're with a company, and you're becoming a BCBA, it can be super tough, super challenging, both mentally and physically, but we are in this together. I will be going live on TikTok for study sessions. Even if you just want to sit and vibe and listen to the music and study, that is a-okay. Like probably once a week, I will be going over just some hot topics to focus on. So today I chose the reinforcement schedules, which goes over our fixed ratio schedule, our fixed interval schedules, our variable interval schedules, our variable ratio schedules. So we're going to go over those definitions, some examples, and then some sample mock questions that will help you break those down. So let's see. All right, so we have our first term of tonight, which is fixed ratio. So a fixed ratio schedule is reinforcement is delivered after a fixed number of responses, right? So it's the response in which the client is engaging in some type of response. So an example of this is a worker gets paid after assembling 10 puzzles, right, for a box. After, he's on that type of schedule, right? So there's not a time component to it. They're just on that fixed. As long as that worker completes those 10 puzzles, they get paid. So a mock question that closely relates to a fixed ratio schedule would be a teacher gives a student a sticker for every 5 math problems completed, right? So that's your example of a fixed ratio schedule, because the client has to complete those 5 math problems in order to be reinforced, right? It's around or about, but it is on that fixed schedule. Then we have variable ratio, which is that, remember, variable means about how much, about, right? So for example, variable ratio schedule is reinforcement is provided after varied number of responses. So it's like our mean, right? It's like it's estimate, it's not specific, right? It's around about this time, this amount of responses that reinforcement is delivered to the learner. So an example of this is like at a casino or slot machine payouts after a random number of plays. After a random number of plays, you may get those stars where it's like ding, 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 ding. So that is the example. When you think of fixed ratio, just think like about around this time, this amount of responses, this client may engage in this type of behavior. A mock question that you may see on your exam that is relevant to a variable ratio schedule would be a child gets a reward after answering a varied number of correct questions, right? And that would be an example of a variable ratio schedule. So if you think about it, with our fixed ratio schedule, the learner had to complete 5 math questions. Like they were on that fixed schedule of 5 questions. However, with the variable ratio schedule, they're reinforced on a bout. It's not a fixed amount. Then we have our fixed interval. So when you think interval, think time. But don't think time, because there's also this fixed time, which is like it's a non-contingent thing where, as long as the response doesn't, or the behavior does not have to occur. So that's the difference between a fixed interval and a fixed time. With a fixed time, that behavior, that response doesn't have to happen. They're still delivered that reinforcement. Where with that fixed interval, a fixed amount of time has to pass before you can deliver that reinforcement. So an example of this is, think of your pay, right? You know, depending on if you work for a company and they pay weekly or bi-weekly, you know that you have to work and you will get paid on every 2 weeks, or you will get paid every week, right? So just put that in your head. Just think fixed rate interval is a set fixed schedule after a certain amount of time that reinforcement is delivered. And I think for most of us, pay is a reinforcement in this field. But our passion and our love is there too. But the greater reinforcement, if we had to pull a preference assessment or a reinforcement assessment, which are two different things, if we remember, preference assessment gives us an idea of what the reinforcement may be, but that reinforcement assessment gives us a definitive on what that is. So just keep that in mind when you're studying as well. All right, guys, and then we have a variable interval schedule. So with a variable interval schedule, reinforcement is provided after an unpredictable amount of time. So just like with the variable ratio is it's an unpredicted amount of time. It's not fixed. Total opposite, right? So an example of this is checking an email with no set schedule. I'm bad for that. I actually have a few emails I have to get back to, but you're checking your emails, but it's on an unpredictable time. It's around that unpredictable time frame. So a mock question that you may get relevant to a variable interval is a teacher praises students at unpredictable times throughout the day. And what schedule is this? That is a variable interval schedule. Which is most common, right? We try to, if you're ever in like a school setting, we try to train our teachers, especially in the beginning of the school year, when we're helping our learners pair with the teacher in the learning environment. We try to encourage that reinforcement, right? We want that reinforcement heavy. We want that prompt heavy. And then eventually we lead to, fading all that reinforcement. And please play the song above, but we want to reinforce, we want to build that behavior momentum, right? So remember that behavior momentum is how we build up that momentum for that designated, that target behavior that we really want. And I went down a rabbit hole with that, but yes, it could, and I'm going to go down a rabbit hole a lot, even though we're just talking about reinforcement schedules, because so many of the other contexts and the terms come into play while you're studying. Like, you're gonna see these questions on the exam, and you gotta think like everything ties into one another, right? Behavior momentum, shaping, task analysis, they're all one. Like, they're all part of what makes up ABA and how we do this. Oh, thank you, Brittany. All right, now let's get into our differential reinforcements. Which I find a lot of people find it difficult to identify within a question. So DRL, right? Differential reinforcement of lower rates. So when we have a DRL procedure, we are trying to reduce the occurrence of a behavior. So maybe your client is yelling out in class, right? We might want to actually diminish that. But in the beginning, we want to lower the occurrence of that behavior, and that leads us to that changing criterion chart, right? It's always trending in the direction in which we want to reduce or increase that behavior. So, for example, like I said, with a DRL, reinforcement is given only if the behavior occurs below a specific rate. So you're going to set that criterion for that you're going to set that criterion. So maybe you're like, okay, if my learner doesn't have a tantrum, if my learner has a tantrum less than 4 times within 15 minutes, I'm going to deliver them reinforcement. So that is what that DRL is. Another example of that is a teacher praises a student for calling out in class only if they do so fewer than 3 times per lesson, right? So you can set those contingencies that you want when you're implementing that DRL procedure. And then a sample mock question of that term would be: a therapist reinforces a child's hand-raising behavior only if it occurs fewer than twice in a 10-minute interval, right? So this is a learner that we have that is constantly raising their hands. I have a learner that's constantly raising hand, and it's usually just for attention, and it's that unwanted attention, right? So we want to implement that DRL procedure so that we can reduce the occurrence of that behavior. And then we have differential reinforcement of high rates. So this is totally opposite to lower rates, because now we want to increase a behavior, right? So for example, like definition would be: reinforcement is provided only when behavior occurs at or above a specific high rate, right? So for example, a salesperson receives a bonus for making at least 10 sales a day. If y'all have ever bought a car and went into a car dealership, you know for sure those sales people are on a DRH schedule, because they have a goal and they must meet that goal, and they probably got a bonus system implemented, right? Sample mock question for a DRH would be: a student earns extra recess if they complete 15 math problems in under 10 minutes, right? As long as they complete those 15-minute problems, that's the only time that they can get reinforced. If they do not complete the 15 math problems, they're not reinforced anymore. So just think with differential reinforcement, we're reinforcing what we want to increase or decrease when it comes to the DRL and the DRH. Then we have differential reinforcement of other behaviors. And with this, I feel like with the DRO and the DRA, a lot of people get those questions confused on the test because they can't differentiate between alternative and other, right? And remember, with one or the other, and even with not so much incompatible, but remember, one teaches a replacement and one does not. So with a DRO, reinforcement is provided when the target behavior is absent for a specific period of time. So there has to be, when you think of other behavior, think absent. Absent, other, absent, absent, other, absent. There has to be an absence of a behavior for a specific time period. So for example, a student receives a sticker every 5 minutes, and they do not every 5 minutes that they do not engage in that disruptive behavior, right? So that disruptive behavior has to be absent. So absent, other, absent, other, absent. Remember, try to remember these things. When you make those connections while you're studying, when you see the questions on your exam, you're going to ask yourself in this mock question, is the behavior absent, right? When you're trying to determine whether it's a DRO, which is differential reinforcement of other behavior, or differential reinforcement of alternative behavior, you're going to be asking yourself, okay, let me think about this. Is the behavior absent or is it present? If it's present, it's probably a DRA. And especially if the question involves replacing that behavior that is occurring, it's definitely probably a DRA, right? But with a DRO, there is the absence of that behavior. And then we have I want to go into DRA, right? Because DRA and DRO is the ones that we get confused. So with the DRA, reinforcement is given for a functionally appropriate alternative behavior. So there doesn't have to be the absence of that target behavior that we're trying to reduce. It can still be present, but it has to be functionally equivalent, right? So, for example, your client wants attention, right? And I'm gonna probably go back to this attention example throughout the live, but they're yelling out in class, right? But your client is now, okay, they're yelling. You train the teacher not to give it attention. You're not giving it attention. Maybe you're gesturing, redirecting to look at the board. Because sometimes with these behaviors, it's very hard to put those behaviors on extinction, especially when you're in a community classroom setting, because it is disruptive, right? So when you are in that, that alternative behavior, if the client now uses his words and says, I need help, or they're calling on you, you could be like, okay, you know what? Good, I'm gonna reinforce you. So with the DRA, again, it has to be functionally equivalent. So DRA, functionally equivalent. DRO, there's an absence. An absence, that target behavior that we want to reduce is not occurring at all. And another example, a child who screamed for attention, just the example that I gave. I actually created these examples and I'm just trying to freestyle, but I'm looking over them at the same time. A sample mock question for this would be: a therapist reinforces a child for raising their hand instead of yelling out. So just like the example I just gave, if your client is engaging in a replacement behavior that is functionally equivalent, then that is a DRA procedure. For a DRO, there has to be an absence of that target behavior in order for reinforcement to be delivered. And then we have DRI, which is also another replacement behavior. So I and A are both, we're working to teach and reinforce that replacement behavior. So with a DRI, which is differential reinforcement of incompatible behaviors, reinforcement is provided for a behavior that is physically incompatible with the behavior, right? So a lot of our clients are runners. They're elopers. Like, if you're going to work and you ain't wearing sneakers, what are you doing? Even if your client isn't a known eloper, our clients have a tendency to go where reinforcement flows. And it may not be you. There might be, maybe a mascot or something for a store if you're in the community, or a male man dressed funny, or, a mascot at school, an unknown eloper might become a eloper. So make sure you have those sneakers on. But two behaviors that our client can't do together is they can't run and they can't walk, right? So that is where we're reinforcing the walking, but we're not reinforcing the running, right? So that is our DRI, that incompatible behavior. You can't run and walk. You can't sit and stand. Like, those are just things that you just physically cannot do. So if you see a mock question and it's giving you an example of opposites, things that can occur, it's probably a DRI procedure. And then a sample question for that is: a teacher gives the student a sticker for sitting in their chair instead of wandering around the classroom. What schedule is that? Drum roll, please. It's the DRI procedure. All right, then we got non-contingent reinforcers. So if you had jumped on the live earlier on, do you remember one of the one things that I said was a non-contingent reinforcement? That is a non-contingent schedule, reinforcement schedule. Fixed time, variable time. Anytime. So with our reinforcement schedules, we have we have the VR, the variable ratio, the fixed ratio, the variable interval, and the fixed interval, right? All those are contingent on about time, or fixed time, or fixed response, or about responses, right? But with our fixed time and our variable time, it is non-contingent. So what do I mean? Non-contingent means that the learner doesn't have to respond. The behavior doesn't have to occur in order for reinforcement to be delivered. So, for example, a teacher gives a student a break every 20 minutes regardless of behavior. This learner could be cutting up in class. This learner could be not paying attention, not doing their iReady lessons, not engaged in the activity, but non-contingently, they get that 20-minute break, right? For whatever reason. So a sample mock question for this is a child receives a preferred item every 10 minutes, regardless of what they are doing, right? What schedule is this? Drum roll, please. A non-contingent reinforcement. Another question is if you do not see that non-contingent reinforcement answer option in that mock, then you can go for a any of those time schedules, that variable time or that fixed time. You just have to identify in the mock question whether it's fixed or is it about. Okay, so is it about the time, which is variable time, or is it a fixed time where it's exactly on that time? Then we have a progressive ratio schedule, which I don't think gets studied enough, but it is heavy on the 6th edition, right? So a progressive ratio schedule is a response requirement for reinforcement and increases systematically over time. One thing that I have learned when studying is that these are words that we use before ABA. Like, these are terms that like are brand new. They're not brand new, right? These are terms that, oh, he's making progress. Progressive. Oh, those words are the same. What does progress mean? So progress means that we're progressing, we're increasing, we're making improvements, right? So for example, a salesperson must make 5 sales for a bonus. Once they hit that 5 sales requirement, now we're on a progressive ratio schedule. So what's the next tier is 10. Make 10 sales, you get your bonus. You hit the 10 tier on those sales. Now we're at 15 sales in order for you to get that reinforcement, that bonus. So when you're looking at these ABA terms, don't confuse yourself. These are they seem complex. I feel that way sometimes too, but I feel that way when we overstudy, when we just don't keep it simple, right? I think some of us, if we're multiple test takers, like, we're just overthinking, right? Especially like if English is your first language, just throwing it out there. I feel like we overthink even more, right? And we overstudy even more, just to put it out there. All right, and then we already went over fixed time schedule, which, if you remember, means what? Non-contingent, right? Non-contingent. So non-contingent means fixed time, variable time schedule, right? All right. And then we have conjunctive schedule. What is a conjunctive schedule? Do y'all remember what a conjunctive schedule is? So a conjunctive schedule is reinforcement occurs only when 2 or more schedules are met. So think of you're driving on a highway. I hope most of y'all have your driver's license, because I know for me, I drive to cases all day long. So conjunction, we're on a conjunction. We're on the highway. We're driving, right? But at some point, there's a conjunction, right? Where the highway meets, right? Highway is meeting, right? So two or more of those schedules have to meet in order for reinforcement to be delivered. So, for example, a worker gets a bonus only if they work 40 hours and makes 20 sales, right? So, for example, like a lot of ABA companies now, like you can get like quarterly bonuses. They're trying to reinforce they're implementing ABA on us and we don't even realize it, right? So when we are on a conjunctive schedule in the field of ABA, usually there's that contingency, right? Where you've met your hours, right? You've met your weekly hours, and you also have very thorough and professional session notes, right? So if you're meeting the professional session notes and you're also meeting your hours, that's a conjunctive schedule. Those are two reinforcement schedules that need to be met in order for you to receive that reinforcement, which is your bonus. So again, conjunctive schedules, you're on a conjunction, you're on the highway. Conjunction is where you merge, right? Traffic is going on the turnpike. I don't know where most of you guys live, but you're coming on the turnpike. That right there, that's that conjunction schedule. Once that's met, smooth sailing, bonus, you're in there swimwear. You're in there like swimwear. In there like swimwear, yes. Now we have chained, right? A chained schedule. And I don't want to include tandem schedule only because tandem schedule is not something that's mentioned under the task content for the 6th edition. They have actually taken it off. So for chain schedule, remember it is in order, right? The schedule, it has to occur in order before reinforcement can be delivered. So there's some sort of sequence. Think of a chain. Think of your necklace. Look, think of your chain. It's a chain, right? The links must go in order to close on the clasp, right? Chain, think of your chain, think of your clipping the chain together, right? All these things help you in order for it to close, the reinforcement. In order to reinforce this chain, right, on a chained schedule, right, the chain must go in order, and it must, in order for it to be reinforced right here, and there goes your chain schedule. So, guys, that is it for Battle of the Mocks. Thank you guys for joining. I'm hoping this recorded. It probably did record. I will share snippets of this on Instagram. If you just want to hang out and study, that is cool as well. Probably on our next series, I will go ahead and do that. I will have time where we go over a certain part of the task list, and another time where we just vibe to a playlist and we just study. It could be your hyper focus time. I could be your study buddy. We can get this done and we will be BCBAs. So you guys, happy studying, and thank you so much for joining my live.